Welcome, everyone, to Phillies Extra, the weekly baseball show from Gameday Central at the Philadelphia Inquirer. I'm your host, Scott Lauber, and as you could probably tell, I'm sitting in the press box at Baycare Ballpark in Clearwater, Florida, where Phillies spring training is in full swing. I'm thrilled and excited to have Kyle Schwarber as our guest this week, but before we welcome him, let me give you a quick story. So last year, right around this time, I was talking to Schwarber in spring training about his unique 2023 season. And when I say unique, I'm not exaggerating. He batted .197 and led the majors with 215 strikeouts. But he also hit 47 home runs, drew 126 walks, and scored 110 runs. 40% of his hits were home runs. He had one more single than home runs the entire year. It was truly a one-of-a-kind year. But of all those numbers, one thing stood out most to him. He told me that he pulled the ball, in his case to right field, 52.5% of the time. That was the highest rate of any hitter in baseball, and much higher than his career mark, which was in the mid-40s. So he spent a large part of the offseason trying to figure out how he could use the whole field more. He did drills with a tee in the offseason to stop from yanking everything to right field. He reinforced those mechanics in spring training, and he stuck with them all of last season. He wound up reducing his pull rate to 48.4%. He batted .300 against lefties, and he raised his overall batting average by 51 points. It was his best season since 2021, and maybe ever. And I bring this up because there's a lot of chatter this spring about whether some of the Phillies' older, more veteran hitters can make adjustments to their approach, be it swinging a fewer pitches out of the strike zone or using more of the field. And, you can bet that Kevin Long, the hitting coach, and the rest of the Phillies hitting department, they're holding up Schwarber as an example to Trey Turner and to others that, you can be a 10-year veteran and be sort of set in your ways and still evolve and figure out ways to get better year over year so that you can have a better season and you can advance as a hitter and evolve. So without further ado, let's get right into my conversation this week with Kyle Schwarber. Kyle Schwarber, welcome to Phillies Extra. Thanks so much for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate it.
I know how busy your days get, especially during these first few weeks of camp. So we're really grateful for you for squeezing us in on your way home today. Let's get right to it. So, one of the things that fascinates me about you is that even now, 10 years into your major league career, you do kind of a deep dive after every season. You pinpoint something that you think you can do differently or do better. Early in your career, maybe it was having better at-bats against lefties. Another year, it was fewer two-strike counts. Last year, it was using the whole field more, and you raised your batting average 50 points. So I was watching you hit the last few days, and someone pointed out to me that there's less bat movement this year. Maybe it's a little bit quieter at the plate, and maybe that means you'll be more direct to the ball. I don't know if that was sort of like what the focus was this year, but is that kind of what you went home and sort of settled on as a goal?
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to describe it, is to where I'm trying to put myself in a good position every time, kind of just make a good decision, the swing or not swing, right? Like that's the biggest thing. And the more movement, the more, wiggle room, whatever it is that you have, and it just makes it harder on yourself, right? So it's more about just trying to put yourself in a good position with your eyes and also still feel strong at the same point, to where you're not moving as much. So then you get more time to see the ball, make a really good decision to swing. And also too, it just allows you to recognize more things and gives you a better, I feel like it could give me a better chance to just put the barrel on the ball.
There are always going to be strikeouts for you, but I mean, the idea maybe to shave some of those. I know Kevin Long said to me the other day, he goes, I think he could strike out maybe 30 less times or something like that. I don't know if that's an ambitious number or not, but is that kind of one of the ideas behind this adjustment?
Well, I hope so. I feel like, that can correlate to a lot of different things, right? That can correlate to a higher batting average. That can correlate to, it's just more balls in play, right? That you don't know what the outcomes will be. So, hopefully that's what this can lead to. I think the other thing, where it kind of more stemmed from was where, I had a lot of success off of left-handed pitching last year, and
Yeah.
the right-handed pitching was, there was still some slug and damage, but the average side wasn't where I would like it to be. And it was funny, we were going throughout the course of the year and pretty much go down to the cage, and we spent an hour after the game and looked at a lot of different things just on drill work that I do versus, Kevin, who's left-handed, versus Rafi, who's a right-hander. And, we do some short, throws, and they try to pretty much just get me out from a short distance. And, we videotaped it, and it's, you could just see clear as day is that, versus lefties, you could see myself getting more down and ready and prepared to make a good decision, and versus righties where that wasn't kind of the same. There was still some extra movement going on before, when they were both at the same window of about to release the ball. So, it's like I need to, mentally I need to put myself in that headspace of, take that as if you're facing a left-handed pitcher, be ready, and go from there.
The core of this team has been intact now for 3 going on 4 years. That's a long time in pro sports. In 2015, it's almost an eternity, right, to have a team that stays together like that. But there are some contracts that'll come up at the end of this season, including yours. Is there a feeling, not that this is something that maybe guys are talking about a lot, but is there kind of like an underlying feeling that it could be the last dance for this group as a core, as a group that's together?
Yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the game, right? Where, everyone just can't, stick around. It's just the way that the game is, the way that, teams, view a future, the way that teams view, prospects that are coming up, roster construction, whatever it is, right? It's just the nature of the game. And, we would love to all, finish our careers together, but, who would want to come out and want to watch a bunch of 40-year-old dudes play, baseball, right? So, I think the biggest thing, right, is just the, really embrace it, right? Like I feel like kind of over the course of these last 3 years is, we've generally become, friends, family, whatever it is, right? That we've been around each other for so long that kind of everyone knows the ins and outs, right? Everyone knows who, everyone is, what gets them the tick. Obviously there's going to be new faces every year, right? But for the majority of, the group, it's a lot of the same guys. So, for us, we gotta, we're going to enjoy the year. We got to find a way, like we said, like we've always been saying, the try to put ourselves in the position to be that last team standing at the end of the year and holding up a trophy. If, that's, if that's winning the division, if that's making the playoffs, and then, playing our brand of baseball and at the right time of the year.
You said the other day that you'd be interested in talking about an extension if that was something the Phillies wanted to discuss. I do wonder, though, I mean, with the potential that you'd be a free agent next winter, how much you paid attention to free agency this year and looked at, let's say other hitters who might be looked at as comparable to you, whether it's Teoscar Hernandez or Pete Alonso, and kind of saw where they ended up in the market and kind of got a thought of like, well, maybe this is a gauge for where I could end up a year from now on the, just sort of in terms of years, dollars, that kind of thing, to get a gauge.
Good question. For me, it's just like, I feel like I live on a daily basis. I feel like, it's just like trying to, get through the day and go from there. But, like for me, right. Like, yeah, I've said this plenty of times where this is where I felt like I've, truly got to kind of be myself and be the player that, is able to, the player I'm able to be, and I feel like there's still a better version than the tank. And I feel like, obviously I'm going to keep trying to make adjustments on a yearly basis, and hopefully those adjustments keep getting me better and better and better, and not, and kind of flipping the script where, with age, right, comes a decline, right? You want, for me, I want it to be the opposite way. At some point there's, it's the inevitability of age, right? And the way that the game just keeps getting better and better and better, but I still feel like I have a lot to give to winning. And this is what this team's going to be about for the foreseeable future, is winning. And when you're winning, everything's, that's all you can ask for as a player. You walk into a club, and you walk into spring training, and you walk into the season, and you walk in through the doors of the clubhouse, you walk in happy, right? Like, that there's a chance to come win. You're just not coming there to, put up numbers and, get the free agency, right? You're trying to win a championship. And that's what I said. I've always said this, the best way to get paid is to win. And that's what I've been about my whole career. And, I'm just going to continue to be that way, and whatever happens, right? If I get the work out here and something gets done, that's awesome. I would love that to happen. But, if it doesn't, I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this team just like I do every year, and see what happens. But, I'm not looking too far ahead to that right now. I'm not looking for the what if it doesn't happen. I'm looking into the 2025 season and trying to figure out how the heck we're going to get to that end.
I'll get you out of here on this. So much always gets made of the batting order. You've hit literally in every spot in the lineup in your career. I think literally every one of them. And but the team has had so much success, and you've had so much success in that leadoff spot. You and I have talked about the leadoff spot and how it's evolved over the years through your career more and more. Do you kind of see it as a role that has shifted away from, let's say, the necessarily the speed guy to the on-base power guy? Shohei Ohtani leads off in L.A. Aaron Judge batted leadoff a little bit for the Yankees a couple of years ago. You've done it now for a while. Is the leadoff spot a different animal now, or do you look at it still as an on-base spot, and whether that's by the home run or by the walk or however it is, getting on base is the name of the game up there?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think kind of going to that spot, right? I think that's more based on kind of just roster construction and what the team values in that spot, right? I think that you're like you said, you're kind of seeing the game go from, speed and whatever it is, right? You're seeing some more power hitters, I guess, some guys who can, hit home runs or whatever it is in the leadoff spot. But also, too, you still see guys who steal, 50, 40 bags in the leadoff spot. So, I think that's just more on, roster construction, what the teams around the league value, and, pretty much who they want in that spot, and the way that they think it's best going to fit for their team, and what's their best chance to win, right? So, I don't have the right answers, and like I've said this before, I'm player number 12. I'm a guy who comes to the field. I'm going to do what I'm told, right? I get paid to play baseball for the organization, and I love every single second of what I do, and that's just what it is. So whatever I get told I'm going to do is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do it with a big smile on my face, right? So, but yeah, I mean, I think I guess you're kind of seeing it go away from what it used to be, especially back in the 90s style of baseball would be in the early 2000s. I think there probably is a little bit of a shift, and I don't know if that's analytical departments or whatever it is making, seeing different changes, but but you still do see those guys who are those speed guys and dynamic guys there up the top as well.
Well, Kyle, you're always so gracious with your time. I can't thank you enough for sharing a little bit of it here with us on Phillies Extra from the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you. I appreciate it. You guys have a great rest of your guys' days, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you. With us and for his time this week. For our Reporter's Notebook segment this week, let's bring on Inquirer columnist David Murphy, who recently spent some time with me here in Clearwater. Murph, it's good to see you as always. Thanks for hopping on.
Man, it was making me anxious watching him talk while he was driving.
Yeah, I assure you he got home safely.
How you doing, Scott? Good to. I'll tell you what, you're not missing much in terms of weather up here. It's still February, still very cold, and quite frankly miserable. So,
well, you got
enjoy your time down there, buddy.
You got out of here at the right time too. It was chilly today. It was chilly.
Right.
When I say chilly, I mean like 50s.
Thoughts and prayers.
So, yeah, I know. No sympathy up there. So I thought we could kind of go back and forth a little bit about some observations from camp so far. But I'll ask you this too. I mean, I wonder whether anything about what you heard from Kyle Schwarber in that interview stuck with you, just as far as, I don't know, maybe about this kind of being the last chance for this group as a core, as a unit. We know Bryce Harper is going to be here for a long time, and so is Trey Turner. But as a group, this may be their last chance to kind of get over the hump.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was a great question on your part. And my takeaway from what he said is that it's very much on at least his mind. Now it's probably much more acute for him, given that he's one of the ones who was in the last year of his deal. But yeah, I think that is definitely going to be a motivating factor for a lot of these guys in this clubhouse. Schwarber in a lot of ways, I think, probably sets the tone for that clubhouse and for that lineup, just because of the gravity and the sincerity that he approaches the game with. It kind of rubs off on everybody, and clearly, that's on his mind. He's kind of looking at this as, and I think JT is another guy who's like that. Who both of them, I remember being in the Citi Field, clubhouse last year, listening to them talk and being confronted with questions about whether the Phillies needed to, quote, blow it up or make some significant changes or whatnot. And both of them, so both of them felt it, and the Phillies did not make significant changes. The whole gang's back. And I think that they should have a chip on their shoulders.
Yeah. I mean, people ask, like, how's Phillies camp going? And, the word that comes to mind, or the phrase that comes to mind for me, is drama free, because compared to, Mets camp, where they're introducing Juan Soto, and Dodgers camp, where Blake Snell and Roki Sasaki are throwing bullpen sessions side by side, or Red Sox camp, where Rafael Devers says he won't play anywhere but third base. Like, it's really quiet here, but it's also not, because of what we're saying, like this whole backdrop of, you got to get over the hump. You've got to win. And, Nick Castellanos, I think, got some attention the other day when he said, there's no pressure on us because, look, the conversation after we lost in the playoffs last year was about all of our weaknesses. And so if you all think that we're not that good, but I couldn't disagree with that more, because I think everyone thinks they're good. Everyone thinks they're really good. And I think every year that goes by without them winning, it ratchets up the pressure a little bit more on them to do it, or else there are going to be changes that get made.
Yeah, I think, Nick, I like Nick and I like listening to him talk, but, at the same time, I'm not sure a lot of these thoughts come out fully baked once he kind of introduces them into the into the public sphere. Look, the idea that any team in Philadelphia is going to have greater or lesser pressure on them than any other team is kind of nonsense. I mean, anybody that plays in this city for a team that is expected to be a contender, I think, wherever this quote unquote pressure is coming from, it's there. And look, we know these guys, these guys put more pressure on themselves than anybody ever could, so I don't think what this team needs is that. I mean, there might be specific guys, maybe, Alec Bohm might be a guy that puts too much pressure on himself, but I don't know that people, dunking on him during the offseason is going to take any of that pressure away. Look, this team, it's interesting, and we see it a lot. The earlier on in the window, a lot of times, that's your best chance it turns out that was your best chance to win it. And we may be seeing that, with the Phillies and the Astros that first year when it felt like a magical wild ride. But when you look back, that may have been their year. Everybody else was down, yada, yada, yada. So yeah, I think there's a huge amount of pressure on them this year. And look, it's been a magical era, but it's going to mean nothing if they don't actually come out of it with a World Series,
Yeah, I mean, they've had two other golden eras, so to speak, in their history. And this reminds me a lot of 1980, where if you talk to Larry Boa and you talk to guys who were on that team, Mike Schmidt, they'll tell you that after 76, 77, 78, losing in the NLCS and then missing the playoffs in 79 with Pete Rose, they went into that season kind of knowing, like, you either win or they're breaking up this core. They're going to make changes. And it's a lot different than the 07 to 11 crew, which had the benefit of winning it all in 08. And so even though they backslid in 09, 10, 11, and those were hugely disappointing postseasons for those teams, they had that World Series sort of out of the way. So when Jimmy Rollins says, I have regrets, his regret is that they won only one and not multiples, but at least they won the one and got that under their belt.
Yeah, I mean, the big tragedy, I've always said this about that 08 squad. The big tragedy of that team is that the Phillies had not yet begun to spend money, and in fact had not done it until it was too late. I mean, if you put that offense was World Series worthy for 3 or 4 years before they finally won it all. I mean, when was it? Ryan Howard hit 50 some home runs in 2006?
Six MVP year,
yeah. So if they would have, if Roy Halladay and Cliff Lee and Roy Oswald and if they make those investments at that point in time, I have no doubt that they, end up winning more than one. They just ended up waiting until all these guys were on the downsides of their career and traded for a guy in Halladay who was on the downside of his career, as brilliant as he was for those couple of seasons. So that was a tragedy there. Here, it's almost the reverse and that's why a guy like Aidan Miller, who I wrote about, Andrew Painter, who everyone has written about, who we both saw throw a bullpen session on Tuesday and looked, just like a machine. That's why those guys are kind of the interesting thing about this era. And they're the ones that could kind of change the narrative here and really kind of extend it, for lack of a better term. The Phillies really have done all of this, with almost exclusively outside of Aaron Nola and I guess Bryson Stott, guys from outside of the organization, guys that they have not homegrown, and that's very rare. I mean, you look at the Dodgers, Seager, Bellinger, you've got all these guys that kind of served as the young, cheap base that they could then augment with their riches. Maybe the Phillies, are going to do it in reverse.
Yeah, I mean, Nola, Rhys Hoskins was homegrown right for a little bit, and then Bowman Stott, and that's why the Painters, the Millers, the Crawfords, that group, they talk a lot about them because that's their hope for keeping the window propped open beyond. Yeah,
and I mean, it's like the one thing, like, don't get me wrong, no disrespect to Bohm or Stott, or even, some of the guys that came before them. But when you have a homegrown superstar like a Chase Utley or a Ryan Howard or a Jimmy Rollins who comes in and is making $600,000 a year and giving you, MVP production, you see it everywhere. Almost exclusively, if you look back at World Series teams that have won a title, they have either have a guy like that or have a guy like that who broke in like that, whether it's Bregman or Altuve or, I mentioned the Dodgers guys, the Rangers guys. I guess, what was his name that came up? The young kid.
Langford, Wyatt Langford. And
and also, I forget who it was. One of their older guys eventually, at some point broke into the league like that. Although they were kind of an exception. But you look at the Diamondbacks with that whole young crew that they had. It really is. And the Marlins, Dombrowski's team, Mookie Betts, Devers, that's what's required to win a championship, because at some point teams get to this point where the Phillies are, where they simply have needs that they can't afford to fill with free agency. So, that's kind of the underlying subplot, I think, of these next 2 years is whether, if it's Miller, if it's one of these like lesser heralded guys, whether it's Johan Rojas suddenly, transforming, if one of these guys can become, and Miller's the most likely,
could be your guy, Gabriel Rincones Jr.
Yeah. Rincon. I love the guy, but even he, and he certainly could be a guy that, comes in and all of a sudden you got a, 5, 6, 7 hole hitter, for the next 3 or 4 years or 5 years at well below market rates. But Miller's the one guy where it's like, he could be that Trout, he could be that guy that really just alters the trajectory of this thing by giving them that kind of bonus. So I think that's one of the interesting subplots of, maybe not this year, but certainly, and Painter has a chance to do the same exact thing on the mound. But certainly over the next couple of years, that might be the biggest question facing this team.
So let's get out of here on this. If there's pressure on this team and the pressure gets greater every year, who's in your crosshairs? Who's sort of got the most heat on them in terms of win or bust?
Well, I've always said, I'm a bit of a managerial skeptic where I just don't think, and I love Rob Thompson, I love Charlie, but I just don't think it matters all that much. I think certainly it can matter at the margins and certainly in a 7-game series, but at the end of the day, it's the Jimmies and the Joes. And, to me, it's the guy that's in charge of assembling those Jimmies and the Joes. It's really hard to, and that's Dave Dombrowski, obviously. You look at this roster, it's really hard not to notice that they're paying Taijuan Walker, $18 million a year, that they're paying Max Kepler $10.5 million a year. And when you add those two numbers up, that's $30 million that, could buy an awfully nice player at some point, that out of two guys that, to this point, one is not going to contribute at all. And the other one is kind of up in the air as to whether, he's going to be Whit Merrifield or something greater than that. So I think Dombrowski, he's look, if you look at, and I don't want to go overboard here. He's done a lot of good things since he's been here. But if you look at some of the moves that he's made, it's been rather underwhelming, trading, he needs Marsh. Pressure. I think Brandon Marsh is a huge Dave Dombrowski legacy. This is a huge Dave Dombrowski legacy season out of Brandon Marsh, because there's a good chance the kid they traded for him is going to be very good. In a year where we're already starting to wonder how we're going to get JT Realmuto off his feet a little more and what we're going to do after he's gone. The guy they traded for Brandon Marsh could have been the answer to that. And they traded him for Brandon Marsh because they thought they were going to get a well above average bat at a premium defensive position that could really solidify them for 6, 7, 8 years. On and on and on and on, from some of these contract extensions. The Luzardo trade, huge Dave Dombrowski legacy trade. I mean, Luzardo, you and I both know the guy's got top of the rotation stuff. I mean, 2 years ago, he was at the top of the rotation. He outperformed Alcantara before he got hurt. He went toe-to-toe with Zach Wheeler, in game 1 of the wild card series and looked pretty good. Struck out 5, walked none, gave up 3 runs, but he was there. He was on the mound. He was that guy. He's much better than a number 5 starter, but he's got to stay healthy. And if he doesn't stay healthy, and they end up trading for a guy who, has already been traded 3 times in his career, and in large part because of the health, it's gonna reflect on the guy who did it. And that's a very high variance move here. That the Luzardo move could be the thing that determines how this whole thing goes. Because, if they get 180 innings out of him like he gave the Marlins 2 years ago, they could win 100 games because, that's a heck of a rotation, and there's no weak spots, and your bullpen's going to be better because of it. But it's all on Dombrowski. It's at some point the proof has to be in the pudding, and we need to see the pudding this year.
I'm with you on how you feel about managers and all of that. I completely agree. It's on the players. It's on the people who build the teams to give the managers what to work with. However, when you backslide from the World Series to Game 7 of the NLCS to the divisional round, and then if you slide back again and you either lose in the wild card round or maybe miss the playoffs, the manager is usually the one who takes the fall. So to me, there is some pressure on Rob Thompson this year to kind of pull the right strings to get them over the hump. And that's why we talk so much about the batting order, and we talk so much about whether Kyle Schwarber should lead off or should it be Trey Turner. At the end of the day, it probably doesn't matter a whole lot. You probably don't score a whole lot more or less runs based on who bats first, second, or third, as long as you got the right first, second, and third. It doesn't matter the order. That said, we focus on the manager for a reason. And I think that if they don't put a stop to this little backslide they've had, the manager probably pays the price for it. So I think they've got to win. And I think Rob Thompson in particular has to win in order to move this thing forward. There will be some changes with the core if they don't win it all. And I think there'll be some changes in the manager seat if they don't win it all as well.
I agree with that 100%.
Look, we could go on and on and on, and we have, you and I, in the past for sure, but still a lot of time left in spring training. So let's pick it up again at some point before the season starts. Dave, thanks for hopping on, and I will see you back in Philly soon. So for our last segment, we always call this hit and run, whether I give a thought on something or we take a reader email. This week, I just want to wrap up with a programming note since we ran a little bit long with our first two segments. If you missed either of our first two shows, including my interviews with Cole Hamels and JT Realmuto, you can check them out by clicking on the Phillies tab on Inquirer.com or going to the Inquirer's YouTube channel. The full episodes are there, and please give them a listen and let me know what you think. Send me an email at slauber@inquirer.com or hit me up on X, Blue Sky, whatever your choice of social media is. I'm there. And looking forward to getting your feedback. If there's a guest you'd like us to get, we'll take requests and see if we can get them on a future show. So that'll do it for Phillies Extra this week. Special thanks to our producer, Angelica Irizarry, for helping us put it all together and doing it often at a moment's notice. And until next week, I want to thank Kyle Schwarber. I want to thank Dave Murphy. And until next week, I'm Scott Lauber. Thanks to you for listening, watching, and of course, reading and following along at Inquirer.com.